Hey everyone! Today we will be doing a demo in Twinmotion. With this project, we will be covering a few of our favorite tips and tricks, followed by a live demo and Q&A where we can take a look at any of the questions you might have. My name is Sam Anderson, and I will be walking you through the project today. I'm a tech marketing manager at Epic Games, where I get to work with Unreal Engine and Twinmotion. Previously, I was a visualization specialist at Shop Architects, where I got to use both of these softwares. If you are not familiar with Twinmotion, it's a software in the Epic Games ecosystem that utilizes real-time rendering in an intuitive way. Most of our users are from the architecture industry, but there are also many others of you out there using the program for other uses, such as pre-viz, product design, concept art, you name it. We have quite a large variety of people using it out there, and we welcome them all. For this project, we will be focusing on the architecture industry and ArchViz. My colleague Martin developed this as a part of our challenge that went live recently. This challenge is a call for blending the old world with the new. With each challenge, we get some really creative designs, so we are excited to see the architectural brilliance that shows up this time. I'll be covering the specifics of the challenge in the Q&A, so if you'd like to learn more, please stick around and we can chat about it. Now let's dive into the project. At first glance, you can see that the project has a lot of distinct architectural viz themes to it. His initial steps were to find some precedent images. ArtStation is clearly a great tool for this. So say for this project, we are wanting to showcase a moody scene with the building in various weather conditions. So if I go to the browser and type in rainy city up here in the search bar, take a look at the images that pop up. You'll notice that there are some color palettes that are quite present. We're getting some reflections on the ground, a lot of strong lights, and some visual hierarchy centered around those lights. So we're going to try to replicate some of the emotions that are evoked with this and do this in Twinmotion. And the great thing about Twinmotion is that we'll be able to filter through the weather conditions quite quickly. So if we set up in a rainy scene, we can always change it to a sunny scene pretty quickly using real-time rendering. So as mentioned, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks in regards to this. We'll first start off talking about lighting and atmospheric fog in relationship to that lighting, as well as adding in some scale, some life to the project using Quixel Megascans. And then lastly, we'll play with manipulating the aesthetic and weather conditions as mentioned before exporting, and then we can take a look at all of the different exporting options. So let's dive into the model now. Now you'll see that there is quite a bit of atmospheric fog in here. Sometimes that can be very desirable for architects when they don't really want to concentrate on the context, but they are trying to sell the story with the building. And so we're doing that here with a combination of the lighting and the visual hierarchy and the focus. So we'll walk through a couple of different ways that you can bring in that fog. So I'm going to come over here to the side. I'm going to switch the speed at which my camera is moving. I can go up to the top right-hand corner, select the eyeball, go down to the second button. This is going to be the speed, and I am going to pick walking speed. So now I'm going to drag and drop in a fog element. To do that, I'm going to go to the left-hand side, open up the library, go to Objects, then go down to Particles, and I'm going to drag and drop this small fog bank in here. I'll zoom in a bit to take a look at it. You'll see it's similar to a cloud shape. We've got some moving densities here, some varied levels of opaqueness. Now you can drag and drop this anywhere that you would like to in the project, so you have control in that way. We can also, if we don't need that large of a space or we're trying to convey a morning shot, we could bring in this ground fog. You'll see that it's a little bit shorter in height and it's got some greater tiling, a little bit more movement. We can take a look at how we can get this effect in other ways, but perhaps we want to first look at applying this to the entire image instead of just a portion of the project. To do that, I'll go ahead and delete this fog here, and I am going to create a new image and see how we can get that atmospheric fog in a more even way across the entire environment. So I'll go to the left-hand side, and I'm going to go into the Media tab down at the bottom. I'm going to go into Image, and I'm going to create a new image here. If I go into the settings, which is in this More button right underneath the thumbnail, I'm going to go into the Weather tab, and you'll see that there's a couple different weather options here. We'll revisit this later before we export. But I'm first going to go to the FX tab, and you'll notice that the smog is set at 83%. So as I lower it, you can see how that's affecting the image. So one interesting thing is manipulating this fog with lights. So as you can see at the top, we're getting a lot of enhancement with the fog, and that's due to some light placement that we have. So I'm going to bring in a light on the left-hand side, and we can take a look at it. I'll go back to the library, go into lights, drag and drop an area light, and then as I pull it up, you can see it's a little box of fog that we've got here. And as I increase the intensity of the light, the fog is increasing, so it's becoming more opaque as it increases. I'll go ahead and turn that intensity down. So you'll see that this doesn't have a lot of the tiling or cloud-like effect. It's more of a shape with that fog. And so that could be helpful if you are trying to convey it on top of a building, as it is so in this image. But I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to drag in a spotlight now. And I'm going to bring it up to the top so we can take a look. You'll see that there's some in the background already here, and you can see that there's some fog already embedded in it. Now that's because we've turned on the smog in the image as a whole, but let's take a look at how we can control the fog using this spotlight. If I go down to the bottom and go to the right-hand side, you'll see there's an option for haze. I can turn that on, and you'll see that it becomes quite dense. Perhaps I want to lighten that up a little bit. I can go and hit more at the bottom right-hand side. And I can control this intensity. And what's great about this is it's going to be independent of the intensity of the light. So I can move this down a little bit, and I'm going to increase the tiling and walk you through this process. You'll notice that you are starting to see some variety with the density, similar to the fog bank that we were looking at earlier. So if we were wanting to showcase steam coming out of the ground or a pipe, we could use something like this and then increase the speed here. And it's going to bring an added level of animation into the fog. So I'll go ahead and turn that down. I do want to note that if your tiling is set at a very low amount, that you're not going to see that speed very much. So if you're working through this and wondering why the speed isn't working, it could be because your tiling is very low. So if you're trying to convey a very even aesthetic of the fog, then you're going to want to have that tiling set pretty low here. So I'll go ahead and delete this, but you'll see that Martin did use this process to help him convey street lights down the road without having to have that added geometry. However, in many cases, the added geometry can help with the scale for the project. As an architectural visualization artist, I love adding in small details that are going to bring a sense of scale and life to the project. And so with lights and benches, we can start to get that. And there are some new features of Twinmotion that are going to take that to the next level. So I'm going to switch to a different image here. So this is going to be more of a streetscape scene, and you'll see that we don't have a lot of geometry up here yet. We do have some puddles, which we can take a look at adding in a moment. So we want to add in some extra features so that doesn't seem sterile. We want it to bring it to life a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the library on the left-hand side, and I'm going to go down to Quixel Megascans. I'll go into the 3D asset, and then I'm going to go into Street. However, if you have not looked at any of the Quixel Megascans, I would encourage you to go through a lot of these and check out the different options for props. So right now I'll go into the props section here, and I'm going to take a look at these bike stands. Perhaps we bring some of these into the scene. So I'm going to drag and drop this in. And now let's bring it over here to where we're working. And we can put it up against the curb. And then now I want to make an array of it across this curb here. What I can do is I can hold down the Shift button, drag and drop it, and you'll notice that I have the option of making instances or copies. Since I want these to be clones, I'm going to pick instance so that I can change the materials, and it will change it for all of them. I'm going to go ahead and bump the number up though to 3. The spacing is going to be the amount that I moved it from its original location. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here, and you'll notice that that third one popped up here. So we have a nice, easy way to make an array. Now I'm going to go back to the left-hand side and say we want to add in one of these fire hydrants. You'll notice that there is a download button on the top right-hand side. So when you're first working with the Quixel Megascans, you will need to download them. So I already had that bike stand loaded, which is why you are not seeing that download button in the top right-hand corner, but I'll walk you through that process now. So I'll go ahead and click this button. You'll see that it says, please sign in to download, so no actions are happening. What I can do is I can go up to the left-hand side, hit File, and go into Sign in to Epic Games. Now I have already done this, so the pop-up window is doing it automatically and is letting me know that it is successful. So with your Epic Games account, which is what you use for Twinmotion as well, you'll be able to have access to all of the assets on the left-hand side. So I'll go back and you'll see that this button is no longer grayed out. I can click on it and it's downloading the asset as we speak. I'll go ahead and drag and drop that down into the scene, and an object creation window is going to pop up. Now this will happen for each time you download the project. So for the very first time, it will initiate an action to transfer the data. But after I've done it once, the next time I can drag and drop it in, it will not prompt me with that window. So you can see that second time was much quicker. So I'll go ahead and delete this. And I'll go back to the library and show you the surfaces that come with Megascans as well. So it's going to really open up the world for creating content quite quickly because you have a plethora of materials that you can pull from. So if I were to go to the asphalt, you'll see that you have options between fine, rough, torn. So if I hit rough here, we can take a look at all of the different options we have for the road. If you haven't already used Megascans in Twinmotion, I would encourage you to check it out. Now we also have the native Twinmotion objects as well. So we have a library here that has props for the house, for the city, for those particles that we spoke about earlier. If I come down to the bottom, you can see how some of these could be very fun elements to add into the project. Let's look at some of this dripping water. So we can imagine that this might be dripping from this corner here, so we can add that in. And if I go back to the particles section and then go to decals, you'll notice that some of these street elements can come from the decals section inside of Twinmotion. So perhaps I want to add in a manhole here. I can place it, and then I have a few different options for controlling the way it looks. I'm hitting F to navigate to that decal. Now we could also go in and add some puddles as well. I could add in some additional stains, bring it to life a little bit more, perhaps lower the opacity here. It's quite strong. Maybe I want to scale this up a little bit, lower the opacity on that. So I'll leave it at that, but I did want to introduce the Quixel Megascans. They're always adding assets to the library, so personally I think it's very exciting each time I spot something new in there. Now let's take a step back and look at the image as a whole and understand how we can change some of these elements quite quickly, which could help with some of the workflows and process and speeding up some of these elements, but still having a powerful scene. So I'm going to go into the left-hand side, and I'm going to go to a video that I've set up. So here, this is underneath the train tracks. And as I hit play, you'll see that it's just a simple pan moving forward with two different main frames. So there's a couple different ways that I can control the settings here. There's this settings button at the bottom. If I click on this, it's going to allow me to change settings to this entire video. If I go into the more settings here, you'll notice that each frame has this. So it's going to apply the setting to just that portion of the video. Perhaps the architect or client wants to see this image in different weather conditions and different lighting settings. You could control that with each frame if you would like, or you could control it to the video as a whole. So right now I am going to control that second frame that we looked at by going to location. And I'm going to change this time of day to be a little bit earlier where we're getting some direct sun on that building, so we can take a look at the shadows that it's creating. I could change the month as well here. And then I could change the north offset, so we have greater control of the sun angles as well. I know shadows can be very useful in adding contrast to an image, but I know that they also can be very helpful for architects conveying an idea. Perhaps this is a hot climate, we want to increase those shadows to convey a sense of coolness within the scene as well. So now I'm going to go back to my camera settings. And I want to play with a few things here. Now we see that we can turn on parallelism. So this is great if you are wanting to align those verticals. So sometimes that can be very helpful in understanding the facade or the elevation of a building. Or we can turn it off again in case we want those converging lines at the top. We can control vignetting here. So this could be helpful, especially within the bridge scene. And then the visual effects. So once again, I am only applying this to the second frame. If we want to apply it to the whole video, we need to go back into the first thumbnail and go to the settings at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and do that to show the difference. So I'm back in this video, go to settings, and I can go into the camera and I'm going to apply it to everything here. So I'll go ahead and turn the parallelism on. You'll notice that the vignetting now says multiple, since this is something that I added in the individual frame. I can turn the depth of field off and on. To control this, I can hit more. Select this button here in the middle of the tab. I can click on the object that I'd like to be in focus. Now I'll go back to the camera settings and go into this visual effects. One of the settings that I always control on my images is here with the contrast and saturation. So I always like to bump this up a little bit, and I usually turn the saturation down just a tad, but this is also very dependent on the mood that you're trying to convey. I could go into this type here and select a color gradient to add on top. So perhaps we are really wanting this to evoke a nice sunny morning. We can filter through these and pick something that's going to work well for the project. I think I'll go with this one here. And then I am going to go back into my settings as a whole. And I'm going to change the weather so that it's not as smoggy as we had it in the beginning. I'll go into the effects here, and I'm going to turn down this fog a little bit. I'm going to turn the particles on here, and you'll notice that it immediately turned on some rain. So we're getting some nice reflection here without having to do any work or setup, which can be very helpful for when you're needing to do a quick turnaround of images. So I'll go back into the weather, and I can play around with the weather here, just to show you the range of possibilities. If we have the precipitation turned on in the middle here with the weather, we could also take a look at different seasons. So you'll see that I'm bringing in the snow here. We also have that tree in the background that's getting those fall colors. So I'll go ahead and put it back to, I'll go back to the summer and then turn down the precipitation so that I have some puddles and reflectivity without the full-on rain. So let's go back into the video and we can see how the changes are reflected. So that's showcasing how you can change the video within a series, such as an animation, but we could also then take each of these frames and create images from them. So if I have this one selected, I can go back into Media, go to Image, hit Create Image, and it's going to retain the settings I created for the video. So perhaps I want this image to be a little bit different with the aspect ratio or any other element. I can always go in and change that here without changing it in the video. So I'll go back to the image once more. I'm going to go into the camera and I'm going to change this field of view a bit. Bring it out. It's a bit much. Perhaps maybe I'll bring it in and then zoom out a bit. I can go back to that image and then refresh it, and you'll see that it updates in the thumbnail as well. Now, if we want this to be a different ratio, we can hit More here, go into Format, hit More underneath Full HD. You'll see that there are a couple options already embedded in it, but I actually want this to be a custom one. So I'll go into More, and perhaps we want this to be square. I could take this 1920 and apply it here as well. You'll notice that it then becomes square. So now let's take a look at some of the export options that we have for this. If I go down to the bottom, you'll notice that there are a few different selections here. Some say empty, some say multi. What's nice is that you can do render batches. So if I select this empty, I can select as many images as I wanted to render at once. Let's take these three. I'll go ahead and deselect the videos. Perhaps I don't want any videos, but you could do the videos at the same time. And if I hit Start Export, a window will pop up asking where to save it. And you'll see that the estimated time is 13 seconds, 8 seconds, which is very speedy in my opinion. Perhaps you don't want to spend the time rendering those out, but you instead want to send a link to your client or your architect to review the images all at once. What I can do then is go into this presenter tab. You'll notice that it says empty. We don't have a presentation for this image set up yet, but we could go to the left-hand side, go to the media, go to presenter. I'm going to create a new presentation. I'll click on this add button, and I'm going to drag and drop these images into my presentation. I could also add any panoramic images I've created or videos as well. But I'm going to keep it with just these images right now. And I'm going to go into the Export tab. And before I hit Start Export, I'm going to remove these images, go into Presenter, select Presenter 2. Then I'm going to hit the More button at the bottom. And I'm going to change this to Cloud Early Access. So when I go into Export, I can then hit Start Export. The video gets transferred to the cloud, and once it's done, it will pop up and say succeeded here. And I can go in and hit Open Presenter Cloud. I'll go ahead and sign in with my Epic Games account. Log in. And you'll now see that this presentation lives on the browser with a list of other projects I have uploaded. Now we could take a look at viewing it, but I want to show the sharing aspect of it. So you can click Share in here. It's going to send a link to your client or even a teammate for them to take a look at the images and walk through the scene. Now this won't be dependent on their hardware, so they'll be able to access this regardless of how great their computer specs are. So it's going to open up the level of accessibility for people going and walking around your project in the 3D environment. Now, an additional bonus export option that you have for Twinmotion is bringing it into Unreal. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Epic Games launcher. And I could go into my library here. I'm going to go ahead and open up a brand new project. I'm going to open up an architecture project here. I'll hit Next. I'm going to start with an ArchViz project. Then I'm just going to keep this in the folder as is. I'm going to go ahead and add that Twinmotion plugin. So to do that, I can go to Plugins here, type in Twinmotion, and I'm going to bring in both of these elements. Now these are in beta, so there are some working elements to them, but it's a great process for bringing in your Twinmotion files. So they have a life that lives outside of the Twinmotion software, and you're going to be able to really get some custom elements by bringing it into Unreal. So I had to restart the project to bring that in, but I can go ahead and close out of that window now. And then I can go in and import the Twinmotion file. So I referred to it earlier as an export option, but it actually can be seen more as an import into Unreal. So I can go to the Datasmith button in the middle top of the page and find the project, and then I'm going to open it. So you'll notice that it was the Twinmotion project. You don't have to export it with any certain Datasmith export. Unreal is now able to read the Twinmotion files with the plugin installed. So this is asking me where I'd like to place it. Content folder is fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit import here. So this may take some time depending on how large your project is. I've sped it up for the purposes of this video. So when it is imported, a message log will popping up letting you know that there are some elements that are not fully imported. So I would recommend you going and taking a look at the plugin release notes to understand which things are and aren't imported. In this case, it's going to be the cars that are not quite supported yet in Unreal. I'll go ahead and exit out of this and show you the scene that was brought in. This is the geometry that was there from the sample project, so I can simply go in and delete that. And I can go into the top left-hand corner. So I could jump into one of these if I wanted. So we can take a look around at the project and see what all came in. Now this could be a great base point for starting your projects in Unreal. It'll bring in all of the geometry. It'll bring in the lights as well. Now the exposure settings are different in Unreal than Twinmotion. So you may need to go in and change the exposure to be more accurate with your scene. However, I think this is a great starting point for getting your project into Unreal. So we'll be switching over to the live portion of this session where I'll have this project pulled up in Twinmotion and we'll be demoing anything you'd like. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat and we will be chatting soon. Okay, let's see. Can we hear me now? I'm so sorry for that. Let's see if we got this working. I believe we are okay. Let me double check. Okay, all good. So sorry about that. Let's start that again. I do want to apologize once again for that. But I was talking about the Twinmotion Challenge. So if this is something that you are interested in joining, the deadline is June 23rd. And we have some rules and some notes that we can send along in the chat if you would like to participate. It is
going to be a pretty simple challenge. We are asking for an image that you can add to social media with a hashtag Twinmotion challenge. There are a few rules, and one of the most important ones is that we ask for no branding and no logos. So we ask to make sure that you stick to that so we don't have to disqualify you from the challenge. And we are asking for a 1920 by 1080 pixel image. So once again, you can put that on to your social media and do a hashtag of Twinmotion challenge for the ability to win $500 cash and some epic swag. So now that we have that covered, we hope that you do participate. We are excited to check out all of the futuristic architecture that's embedded into these historic platforms and settings. So hoping to see that. But now I'll go ahead and pull up the image once again so we can kind of take a look at the project. And if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. I'll be kind of monitoring both of these things to make sure we get all of your questions answered. I know that we did have a few questions regarding hardware and specs. That's something that we always get. And so the hardware that I'm working off of is an RTX 2080. And so it works very well for any of the 4K images and 4K videos that we do. You could also do 360 videos with that. I know I'm very jealous that you have into the 30 series, so you should be good with that. We also had a question about, can you put video and live stream content into your project? So we are only have the ability to do videos at this point, so we cannot connect to that live stream. But just to show you, I wanted to take a look at this screen right here. If I go into the left-hand side and go into videos, you'll see that there's a video sample here. I can drag and drop that onto the bench. And then I could click here on this project, and then you could pick a different video if you wanted to bring in a different video here. So unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do the web page live content, but hopefully in the future, that will be a possibility. So it's a pretty nice option here, and I think really brings the project to life. If you're doing something that is a video content or going beyond the 2D image, if you have that video embedded in there. And so I'm gonna check and see if there's any questions at the moment. Nothing right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and demo some of the things that we've been working on with this project. As I mentioned, my colleague Martin worked on this project. He got the buildings from Evermotion, and then he manipulated, edited the project in order to meet the challenge needs. And we've done some tips and tricks as well, some videos that are coming out. So you'll be able to refer to those videos if you need to, but I'm gonna go ahead and showcase some of them here as well. So I did want to showcase this holographic map here. So this he created using a poster from our library. So if I go to the left-hand side and go into objects, you're able to pull some decorations from the library. So let me type in poster here. And you can drag in one of these posters and then apply any material that you would like to it. So you could use that video content once again, or you could use a map like he did. But let me go back into my project, into a good view here. So you could drag and drop this on. And so this is how he created it. So it's going to be just a material or a shape that you can bring it into Twinmotion. And then you can always go in and edit the material. So if you're struggling of having to feel like you have to go back into Rhino or Revit in order to bring in geometry, I encourage you to get a little creative and try to use some of the assets in Twinmotion. It can be a good help you with your speed and workflows to kind of speed that up a little bit. But I did want to note that he created this whole thing with the Twinmotion materials and objects. So that is a possibility for you here. So this right here at the bottom is just a tool from the primitives here. So you can drag in a box and scale it to match those needs. And we also can do that in order to help convey some of the light elements in the project. So I'm going to switch over to this car real quick. And before I go into this, I do see that there is a question about Megascan materials. And at the moment, the Megascan materials are for 2K for optimization purposes. However, if you are in Unreal, you have the ability to get that 4K quality. So in Twinmotion, it is only 2K. I also see that it has a little bit of a lag on my screen, so I'll slow down a little bit to make sure that you guys can follow along. And let's see. So another question we had is about some of these car streaks. So for these car streaks, what Martin did was he went ahead and brought in some of the geometry that's going to follow the curve of the road here. So you'll see that there's some cylinders here, and then we were able to apply a glow material here. So I can kind of control this, and you can see that it's creating that light element and following the car. So this is going to work well for 2D images, not for the 3D animations, but sometimes when you're working on visualization images, you do want those car streaks, and you do want to have those elements there so that you're not always having to do post-production at the end. So this can be a great outlet for that. And I'll also take a look at the car, and you'll see that there are some really nice headlights in here, and it's kind of getting that atmospheric flow that we showcase with the spotlight. So for this car, he did bring in a few elements. So if I can click on the car, you'll see that he has this brake 01, and we have some spotlights in here, as well as an oil tank. So the oil tank he did bring in from the primitives on the left-hand side, and then he added a material to them, the light material, in order to showcase the lights turning on and off in the car. And so this is going to set up the car in order to have all of those elements needed, and then you can put it into a folder. And so we have it named Brake 01. And then if you wanted to, you could add to the user library. So if I go to the left-hand side and go to user library down at the bottom, you'll see that the Brake 01 is now in here. So what I could do is I could go back to the road, and I'm going to create a custom path using this car. So I'm going to go to the bottom, and there's going to be a context button on the left-hand side. And I'm going to go into Path here and select Custom Path. And then I'm going to click this pin here, and I'm going to draw on the road the path of the car that I would like for the car to have. And then under box 01, I can drag and drop this car in here. And you'll see that we have the car now following that path here. And then we can control the speed. So if we'd like to bump this up a little bit, we can control that here. We could also control whether it's reversing. Not sure why you would want to show this with a car, but perhaps maybe you do. And then you can also control this follow. So this is going to make sure that the car is aligned with that path as it's going through. So you have some different options here. And this is just to kind of showcase that you do have the ability to create any of these paths that you would like to help with your project. You are able to add them to your user library here and then drag and drop it into the custom path. So this creates a great option for controlling some of these elements that might not be super noticeable at first. But let's see. Let's take a look at some of the other questions. So we have a question about templates. So we are working, we do realize that this can be a very helpful thing for users, especially being able to look at a project and see how it's set up. So we do have that in mind, and we are developing towards that. But I do want to showcase, we do have a model that you can pull up. I'm trying to take a look at it here. So we do have the demo scene by going up to the File, Demo Scene Materials room. I'm not sure if this is what you are looking for, but it will be a good asset if you're wanting to take a look at a bunch of different materials and elements that are accessible in Twinmotion. That could be a starting point. But we do hear you, and if you want to add that to our roadmap, that would be super great. As we mentioned in a little bit in the chat, we do have a roadmap, and getting your feedback on the roadmap is great for us to understand what we should be developing towards. So if you could request that on the roadmap, that would be really, really amazing. And so let's see. I'm going to keep looking. So it looks like we have some questions about digital twin. So this is a great question. I know that this is a very exciting feature that Epic is exploring and showcasing. So at the moment, we only have some of those capabilities for Unreal. That's not to say that some of them are going to be embedded in Twinmotion in the future, but I would recommend at this point, if you're looking for some of those features, it might be best to start with your information going into Unreal. So with the bridge that I showcased at the end of the demo, so that's the plugin that was used for Unreal to import Twinmotion files into Unreal. The ability to bring in metadata is possible. So if those are some of the elements that you're wanting to showcase in your digital twin, you could take it into Twinmotion and then into Unreal as well. So hopefully that answers your question there. But let's see. We've got some questions about V-Ray. So there is going to be a possibility with the Datasmith feature. So if you're not familiar with Datasmith, it's a file export that you would be able to bring into this import system. So here I have imports. You'll see that these are all FBX. We are developing the ability to bring in some of the Datasmith files. So if you've used 3ds Max and V-Ray and brought stuff into Unreal, it's going to utilize that technology for Twinmotion. So here going forward, we're going to look to have Datasmith be an accessible import system for Twinmotion. So if you have those materials, I would be on the lookout for that Datasmith plugin. So you'll be able to import Datasmith here, which I think is going to open up a lot of doors for people who have experience with Unreal, but not even that. If you are working in a lot of different CAD softwares, there's a lot of accessibility to those as well. So let me take a look and let's see if there's anything that I'm missing. So yeah, so we have a question about a stable version of Twinmotion exporter to Unreal. It would be great to hear what you're experiencing with that, where it's failing. As mentioned, we are working on getting some of the assets more and more embedded into that as we go. So some of the custom paths are not possible in Unreal. So are the cars and the smart assets for people as well. So anything that's going to be animated in Twinmotion at the moment is not able to come into Unreal. So it'd be good to hear where you're having difficulties with that so I can better address your question. Yeah, it's unfortunate that it's not working for you. So I'd love to hear what is causing issues for you there. But let's see. We have some questions about some of the lighting and bathroom settings. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up one of these objects. So I'm going to go into Home, Bathroom, let's see, Sanitary 18. So I'm going to drag and drop this in. We've got a little bathroom action happening on the floor here. So yes, I can see that there is an issue with the exposure. And so this could be a bug at the moment, but it could also be an exposure issue with the auto exposure. So I'm going to go into my image here. Let me go ahead and create a new one and go into my lighting. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit. This is a great question because obviously there are some things a little bit overexposed, isn't it? If we go into the sanitary option here, let me see what's going to be the issue. So it's just this in overall. So thank you for bringing this up. I see that this is not, there's not a straightaway answer for this. So there's a potential that with some of the exposure, it can cause issues. So this is an auto exposure that's being turned on and off. So what's happening here is we have a night scene and we have this light in here. So with the lighting setup that we currently have, when you have this auto exposure turned on, it's going to be overexposed. So I would encourage you to check this out and then you could come in here and play with this. So this is also one of the reasons that I mentioned in the demo that you could come into issues when you bring it into Unreal with some of the lighting. It just calculates the lighting differently, and the auto exposure is different in each. So if you're working in Unreal, you could go into the post-processing volume and turn off the auto exposure. So then you can have better control, and then you would need to kind of set your lights for the exposure that you are setting in Unreal. So hopefully that answers your question. That was a great one. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look and see what else we've got going on. So there's a question about any recommendations for people wanting to learn more about ArchViz. This is great. There are a lot of resources out there. There's some blogs that are going to kind of walk you through some of the elements of ArchViz, but there's also some elements in the Epic ecosystem as well if you're interested. So if you haven't explored the Unreal Online Learning platform, I'd encourage you to do so. It's going to take you through projects and kind of go from beginning to end in order to get some of the elements that are important to architects. So if you're working in Unreal, it will help you with the glass elements and making sure that you have the materials portrayed correctly, because I know that can be very important in ArchViz, making sure that the elements and materials are there and it all works great. There are also some Twinmotion projects in there as well. So I would encourage you to go check those out. It's such a good platform. That's honestly where I spent a lot of my time learning a lot of this in the past. Because as mentioned, I did come from an architecture firm working on purely ArchViz, and then was able to kind of dive into those Epic resources in order to learn some of the Twinmotion and Unreal softwares out there. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see, we have a question about ray tracing in the near future, and luckily, we have gotten this a lot, and so we are working on it. I would go in and check the roadmap that I had referred to earlier. That's going to have the kind of latest information on the ray tracing elements, but it is coming. It's a matter of time, so I can't give any dates about when at the moment, but we do know that that is something that's very important to our users, and so we are excited to have that in our Twinmotion atmosphere at some point. Let's see. We have a question about subscription licenses and the trial version. So it seems like someone is working in the trial version and they're still on the early access license then. So yes, I would go ahead and reach out to the contact, whether you're working with a reseller or the Twinmotion support team, to get some of those issues answered with your license. I unfortunately I don't have the ability to answer that here. But yes, if you are on the, let's see, if you are on the trial version, you may not have the early access just yet, but stay tuned. We are kind of working through that. So I would, if you have a reseller, I would reach out to them to kind of get a better understanding of your subscription and license. And let's see. Let's see, there's no World Environment Day challenge. Well, that is a great suggestion. Perhaps we add that to our to-do list, to our roadmap. That would be really, really great. And then we have a question about the Twinmotion Plant Vegetation Library. So we are continuing to develop for this, and in the future, we are working with Quixel Megascans as well. So there are always new assets that are coming into the ecosystem, the Epic ecosystem, and so I would continue to check those Quixel Megascans. You could even download the Quixel Bridge if you are ever interested in taking a look at the full library, and without going through Twinmotion, you could go there first if you wanted to kind of explore all of the different vegetation assets there. And we are always adding to our library as well. And so we will be continuing to update those for our landscape designers out there. Now let's see if there's anything else I am missing. We had a question about the challenge for someone who joined in late. I'll go ahead and repeat that. So it's going to be blending the old world with the new. So that's the topic of the challenge. And so you'll see here that we have an older city landscape environment, and then we have this kind of new futuristic top at the on the 3rd and 4th floor. And so we're interested in taking a look at some of the new architectural developments in the world. Obviously, there's a lot of older cities and older contexts, and it's an interesting, it's very interesting to kind of see the two blend together. So we would love to see our users and our artists out there represent this in creative ways. So that's the topic of the challenge. And once again, that's due on June 23rd, and it will be a 2D image at 1920 by 1080, and you can post it on social media with the hashtag Twinmotion Challenge, and we have someone kind of coming through those to grab all of the entries, and the winner will get a $500 cash prize and epic swag. So for the person that asked that, we hope that you join in on the challenge. So let's see if there's anything else that we've got. So yes, we also have a question about sky domes. So currently here, I'm going to go into the other image that we have pulled up. So let's see, I know that here we have the background here, and let me see if we have the sky dome. So if I turn this on, you'll see that we are getting some clouds in here, and there is a great tips and tricks that covers this. So if you have a question about bringing in your sky dome, you could go and check out that tips and trick video, and it's going to allow you to bring in a certain cloud or HDRI that you would like. In the future, we are working to embed this into the software itself, so this will be included. One tip is if you do bring this model into Unreal, that sky dome is going to come in, which could be very confusing when you first bring it in, because you might think the lighting's not working. So when you bring it into Unreal, don't forget to turn that off. But yeah, this is just a geometry that has the HDRI embedded into the map. So I went ahead and selected the HDRI sky dome, and then went down here to the material color, and you can kind of control the darkness and some of the coloring with this. And then you can hit more at the bottom, and you'll see that the texture is embedded here. So let's take a look and see. And see what other questions we have. So we have a question about a harsh blend or a light blend. We can choose from how the old is, and we can also choose how the new is. Yes, so it's all up to your interpretation. Obviously, it's all very subjective of older architecture and newer architecture, even depending on where we are living now. And so it's all up to your interpretation. We're more interested in seeing the kind of creative aspects that come out of it. There's not any kind of rules or definition into what is old and what is new, whether it needs to be very modern versus very historic. I think we are interested in more so in your interpretation of how that's going to look. But we do some of these models to help get the ideas flowing there. So I did want to point that out. But yeah, it's up to your interpretation. There's no hard rule for the blend there. So let's see. So correct, the sky domes, if you're doing some of the night to day elements, the sky dome could affect it, just as the rotation of the sky dome is not going to be related to the sky dome here. So if I am coming to the eyeball at the top right-hand corner in time of day, as I edit this, it is not going to rotate that as well. So that is something important to kind of keep in mind when you're putting HDRI sky. As mentioned, we are working on getting it into the software, so hopefully that won't be a constraint to you in the future or a bottleneck to you in the future. But I know I'm very excited about that as well. I of course got my favorite HDRI sky maps. I think I don't know about you all, but as a visual artist, every time I see a good sunset in my mind, I'm like, that would be a great HDRI map. But let's see if there are any other questions out there. So we've got a question about any glitches on lower end PCs. So unfortunately, it is going to be dependent on your PC and some of your hardware specs that you have. You do have the ability to control this in some degree under the edit preferences with your quality here. So when you're working, if you're getting glitches when you're working, what you could do is you could change this to medium or ultra. And if I hit OK, you'll see that there are some elements that are changed here. However, I'm able to move around a lot quicker. This, however, will not affect your end output. So if you're working with this quality and then you go in and export a video, it's going to be that high quality setting. So you might want to toggle in between the two just to make sure that the high quality is going to be what you imagined. But hopefully this could help you when you're working. If you have multiple programs up, that is one thing. Is also if you are on a older computer or lower end hardware, I would go and make sure that you kind of have other things closed to give you a good result there. But let's see if there's anything else. We have just a few more minutes, so if you have any other questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Some additional questions about optimization, since we're talking about some of that here. A helpful tip could be also to take a look at your lighting. So I'm going to go back and go into the high quality preference. So I'll go here, go to the ultra inside, and I'm going to filter by light. And I'll select the spotlight here. And the shadows off and on setting here, if I turn this on, you're going to see a little S pop up. And that means that the shadow is on. And so this is going to affect your frames per second. So you'll see that, let's see, I'm streaming right now, so my frames per second is a little lower than I would like. But when I turn the shadows off and on, if I had a lot of lights that had those shadows, it's going to affect the frame per second. So if you're struggling with having a very low frame per second, I would go and double check your lights and make sure that those have the shadows off for that. So let's see. Glad to see that people have a lot of love for Twinmotion. And we are working on some tips and tricks videos. There's just a few of us working on it, so hopefully we can get some more out to you in the future. There are a couple coming out with this challenge in particular, so be on the lookout for that. And yes, I see a request for the fire. Once again, it'd be great to get that into our product board, our future roadmap, if that's something. I can make a note of that as well. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And let's see, if we don't have any other questions, I can go ahead and stop my screen share. And thank you all for being here with us. I know that it's time out of your day to join us, perhaps time out of your lunchtime as well. So we want to thank you for joining us. We are excited to see all of the challenge entries and just all of the work done in Twinmotion in general, as well as some of the images that are going up into ArtStation. So keep that going, and hopefully we'll be able to chat with you more in the future over some webinars, and we'll get out some more tips and tricks. So thank you all for joining us. I'll say farewell and good